If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come, bring my spirits up. There's some shit I like to fix, but I still know that I'm blessed.
Welcome back to my coverage of the Kristin Smart trial. We're headed into day 7 of the trial, August 3rd, 2022, Wednesday. Today, you'll hear about 4 more former Cal Poly students who took the stand, starting with Trevor again. He had left off the previous day. And wait till you hear what the 4th and final witness has to say. Some media outlets are calling it a bombshell and that they are just shocked. And personally, I've been following this case for so long, it really wasn't such a surprise to me. I remember hearing something along these lines in the past, to be honest. Some variation of it anyway. Let me know in the comments at the end of the video, once you hear what was said, if your jaw dropped or not, as one of the reporters stated it. In this episode, we'll hear a little more about the Smart family and how they're doing in the courtroom, how they're reacting. And apparently it got a little heated in court today with objections and overruling, and I mentioned a few of them through my coverage here today, but there was more than that. I just covered the most interesting ones. But there was plenty more that I didn't cover. So let's head into what happened today in court.
The Kristin Smart murder trial picked up on Wednesday with the testimony of Trevor Belcher, who had multiple encounters with Kristin Smart at a house party on the night of her disappearance. Belcher was questioned about the demeanor of the woman he met that night by the name of Roxy. Trevor Belcher testified that he vividly remembered Kristin as being pretty and flirtatious. He said Kristin walked up to him, introduced herself as Roxy, and kissed him.
Trevor was first to take the stand, and he had left off with his testimony on Tuesday. He said Kristin did not smell like alcohol, but it was more like she was tripping on something.
Testified, but he said that she was almost like acting like a druggie, out of it, spacey, and she was not on her feet. She was not stable during all of that, Julie.
Oh, my. Now, this is kind of a head scratcher, but this is a state witness that they called who testified to this. Wow.
Right, because he had that interaction, and we don't know where they're going with this.
It seems obvious to me where they're going with this.
So, is it possibly to put out there this reputation that they're trying to dismay, that, you know, she was having trouble in school and all of that?
No. I don't think that's it.
Or was it the fact that possibly she wasn't intoxicated, but maybe she was roofied? So there's buzz in the gallery. We're still trying to figure it out.
It was obvious to me, especially with Paul's noted sex drug perversions. I was surprised the reporter didn't catch on to that sooner, but I guess I don't realize that not everybody has been obsessed with this case for the last 26 years. It's interesting to know that some of us know more about it than the reporters.
Wow, now that makes sense. There you go. That could be it. Ooh, both of those things you shared with us, Matt, both really big bombshells. And, you know,
Trevor went on to share when he was roofied at a bar and how he felt wild and happy, and he wanted to dance, and normally he's not a dancer. He was more social, and then eventually he got sick and he had to lay down. He said he did not see Kristin drinking at the party, and in hindsight, with his experience, it now leads him to believe that she was roofied. Sanger objected to that on foundation, which was overruled. Sanger asked if he saw any drugs at the party, and Trevor answered no. And on redirect, the prosecution asked if Trevor saw evidence of drugs when he was roofied. And of course, the answer to that was also no. Trevor explained how Kristin pulled him into the bathroom, and she was smoothing her makeup and asking him if he thought she was ugly. She asked him that twice. He said no, both times. She asked him what guy he would hook up with at the party, and he said, quote, "I would pick me," end quote. Kristin laughed him off. He told her Ross, the basketball player she showed interest in, was a nice guy. She then asked him to leave the bathroom because she needed to go to the bathroom. He went on and spoke about Paul coming over as soon as he left the bathroom. Paul, with authority in his voice, asked, "What I'd like to know is, what did you do with her in the bathroom?" When Trevor said nothing, Paul laughed, seeming relieved, and Trevor just assumed the guy was Kristin's boyfriend. Kristin and Trevor spoke in the backyard, and Kristin said she thought Ross hated her. Trevor chatted about their zodiac signs, and they discovered they actually shared the same birth date. Kristin briefly kissed him again, and he pushed her away. Trevor saw Kristin in the backyard where he had pushed her away, as I just mentioned. She stumbled away after that. So it happened again. There was another question presented by a juror, asking this time if Kristin had her makeup bag in the bathroom at the party when she was smoothing her makeup. Trevor answered no. He said she was only using her fingers. Remember how we already heard about notes with questions being submitted to the jury? Well, they're vetted by the judge and the attorneys first. And I think it's a pretty good idea. I like how engaged this jury is too, and they're listening, paying attention, and asking relevant questions. A little bit on cross-examination. The focus was on Trevor's inconsistencies, such as his arrival time at the party, how much beer he drank. Sanger also challenged why he didn't mention Paul to investigators in 1996, and Trevor said when investigators came, they only were asking him about Kristin. He didn't really think much about Paul at the time. These tactics seem pretty desperate to me on the defense's behalf, like trying to get that gotcha moment, but they fizzle out, it seems, the way that I'm seeing it from my angle anyway. Trevor was excused at 10:49 a.m., and next to testify was Eric Wilkins. Oh, he was a Cal Poly freshman on May 24th, 1996, and attended the Crandall Way party with his roommate, Nathan. He admitted specific details were hard to recall about that night. He did remember Kristin lying in the front yard by a bush. She seemed passed out and not dressed for cold weather, he remembered. And it was nighttime, so it gets chilly here around the nighttime. The ocean's not far away. She was not speaking coherently. He did remember that. And he said that he did not remember everything he said to Kristin that night, but he did specifically remember that he told her to go inside the house.
Up next, Jennifer Medeiros testified that she lived in the dorm across from Kristin Smart.
Jennifer talked about how she, Kristin's roommate, and Margarita, one of Kristin's good friends, who was with her earlier the night before, all noticed she was missing Saturday morning, and they all became very concerned. So Jennifer called the SLO Police Department on Sunday, but they told her to call Cal Poly Police. And the campus police said it was Memorial Weekend, and if she wasn't back by Tuesday, to call back. And I got to tell you how much this pisses me off. Many of you already know about the Kristin Smart Campus Safety Act that was voted in her honor. So this never happens again, hopefully. As you can tell, Jennifer didn't wait to call back on Tuesday. She called both the police departments back on Monday. She was very emotional, recalling how the feelings of hopelessness grew each day. And finally, when Kristin was a no-show to class on Tuesday, the Cal Poly police took a report after all those attempts to get someone's attention. It just infuriates me. You can see all the benefits of the Security Act of 1998. If you want to know all the details, look it up. It's worthwhile. I know it's made a big difference for safety on campus.
Choking back tears, Medeiros said, quote, "The feeling of hopelessness grew each day."
I found Jennifer's cross-examination interesting. Sanger had questions for her regarding a guy named Ted. He went on to explain that Ted was one of several men listed as possible suspects. I've never heard of this Ted guy. Ted was apparently known to knock on Jennifer's window in the morning, and she said she didn't recall if he knocked on her window that morning around 8 a.m. She further explained they were really good friends and knocking on windows was normal for their friend group at the time. Ted lived in another dorm with his roommate Dustin, which that's Crystal's boyfriend. As you recall, Crystal has already testified earlier in the trial. And I found a little side note. This wasn't part of the testimony, but I found it interesting. Crystal and Dustin spent the night in Dustin's dorm room on May 24th, 96. And they were there into the next day, the 25th. And Crystal's friend Jana, who was visiting from out of town, actually slept in Crystal and Kristin's dorm room. And I didn't know that either. Jennifer was excused from the court at 1:48 p.m.
Next to testify was Derek C., Paul Flores' roommate at the time of Kristin's disappearance.
Paul's roommate, Derek, was in Oakland that holiday weekend, and when he returned on Tuesday, he heard the buzz about Kristin, so he asked Paul about it. And Paul told Derek that he saw Kristin at a party, that she went missing after the party, and he was the last person to see her. Derek made a joke saying Paul probably did something to her, and Paul joked back.
Yeah, she's at my mom's house right now.
This testimony prompted another note from the jury, where the jury wanted to know, did he look you in the eyes when he said that? Derek's answer was yes.
Going back to the first, my jaw was wide open when you said, related to us that statement from the roommate saying, she's at my mother's house. I mean, that gave me chills. I'm sure it did many people watching this, because then right there you think of Ruben Flores and how he's implicated in this by officials. Ooh. Okay, that's huge testimony.
So there you have it. There's what they're calling the bombshell testimony, jaw-dropping, gave her chills. For me, and probably a lot of us following the case for this long, I didn't have any of those reactions. It wasn't surprising at all. And a lot of us recall Susan's backyard and how that played in to the whole scenario. It was actually the first time I've heard her backyard mentioned in the trial, though, or her house. It wasn't a backyard specifically, I guess. I'm not going to branch out too far, but most of us who have been following the case know the links over the years to Susan's Branch Street house. I would like to know if we're going to hear more about Susan's house and what connection, if any, there is to the case. Do they still think that Kristin was there? Was her watch buried in the backyard? Was that her earring in the driveway? So many questions. I'm glad to hear that her home is at least being mentioned. I have a clip here I want to share with you that I slowed down, and I remember feeling so satisfied way back when the search warrants were served and seeing Susan in her home being violated with her holed up inside, paranoid, peeking out of her windows. It was reminiscent of Paul and Ruben, who were both in front of their homes, staring down the Google Maps car as it drove by. All of us locals remember the Dig Up the Yard campaign. And here's another one of my favorites, when Susan got arrested for assault. I have a Susan episode on standby, but I'm honestly too scared to post it. Speaking of paranoia. Back to Derek's testimony. He testified he did not drink with Paul, and he explained Paul became overly aggressive and confrontational with other people when he drank. The prosecution asked Derek about the windows in the dorm and how they pushed out and swung out a couple feet. Sanger asked questions submitted by the jury again. One question was, can a person easily come in through the dorm window? Derek said he did not believe so. In all honesty, I've never seen or heard of this, and especially the frequency of these jury questions. But like I said before, I love the engagement and the relevant questions they're asking. It's actually encouraging if you ask me. The next note sent by jurors, the question was there an exit door at the end of the dorm on the first floor? And Derek answered yes. Our room was the third door from the exit, was his full answer. On cross-examination, Derek was asked if he noticed unusual smells, any staining, or anything unusual when he got back to the dorm room. He said no. Ruben's attorney asked about Paul's demeanor after the party, and Derek said he seemed to be more serious. As you can tell, the tributes for Kristin continue to this day. Derek was excused at 4:18 p.m. and is subject to recall, as most of the other witnesses, if not all, have been subject to recall so far. All right, let's head into day 8 of the Kristin Smart trial, Thursday, August 4th of 2022. And right off the bat, we find out that today we lost another juror for Ruben. There was no explanation given. Another alternate was sworn in, and it sounds like this reporter finally got a seat in the courtroom versus the overflow room. And here's his insight as an eye and ear witness to the proceedings.
But today was the day, Matt Johnson. Share with us what you learned looking at that jury, please.
Right. So, and we've lost a few jurors and a few alternates in all of this, right? And that's the big worry by people that are associated with this case. Last week, they didn't want to lose a juror when a juror had an emergency, so they postponed testimony by a few days. And then there was a delay on Monday, and they had to replace one of Ruben Flores' jurors. So I went in there today.
It goes to show why jury selection is so important. And later on in the video, they will cover some of the challenges, especially in our economic times, and how it affects juries. For now, this is a San Luis Obispo County judge that has some insight as to his opinions about jury selections and so on.
One of the biggest reasons cases get reversed is jury issues. I mean, you'll get people from time to time that clearly don't want to be on the jury, and they're saying things during jury selection that's pretty outrageous just to get out. And, some judges always tended to try to force them. And when I was doing that job, I would say, if they don't want to be here, I don't want them here. But I want people in here that are willing to make the public commitment and are willing to listen and make a decision, not someone that's going to be constantly trying to figure out a way to get out of there.
Here's another flaw in our so-called justice system, along with the fact that the more money you have, the better off you'll be, typically, as far as court.
But in long trials like this, it is a little bit, at least from a layman's perspective, concerning, because there are only certain types of people who can dedicate 3 months of their lives, right? So is it really a jury of your peers at that point?
Yeah, that's what happens. I mean, you can be excused from jury duty, as you're probably well aware, if you have what's called an extreme hardship. Whether that's a health issue, you're taking care of someone else. Whether you're personally, you have your own business, you can't take 3 months off your business or you'll go under financially. A lot of issues like that.
Remember the previous episode, how I wanted to know the jury configuration? Well, right on cue, we now have those answers. I just love how my questions are just magically answered within a day. Let's finally learn about male, female age, other clues, and even some physical descriptions from someone who's actually in the courtroom.
The jury makeup right now, this is what it looks like. 12 jurors each, we know that. So 7 alternates remain for Paul Flores. With that, we're looking at 4 men and also 8 women. Now, with the father, Ruben Flores, that seated on the left side of the gallery there, 12 jurors, 5 alternates remain, which includes 5 men and 7 men rather, and 5 women.
Could this possibly give insight as to why we've already lost 2 of Ruben's jurors?
So I looked at them and I'm trying to guess their ages, and it does skew older for the father's jury and his alternates. And quite frankly, a lot of them resemble him in certain ways, facial hair and gray hair. A lot of them wear masks.
On the contrary, listen to his observations as far as Paul's jury and their ages and even their understanding of what was going on at the times. I found this interesting myself.
there's a lot of young jurors on there deciding a case where they don't really understand how life works, right? Like there weren't cell phones, and we weren't checking in with our moms several times a day, and there weren't GPS trackers. Is that going to matter in this case?
It's interesting that they would pick a younger jury. The reason I would think you might want to do that is if the events basically involve the comings and goings of young people in college. Maybe the thought by the lawyers is that younger people in college or just out of college may understand the social dynamic a little better. That's the only reason I could think.
Since the cameras cannot be in the courtroom, this gives us a visual of how it's set up, especially with the strange occurrence of two juries in there at the same time.
In the courtroom, I sat right behind the Smart family, and I was taking close attention to the jury, and I want to put on your screen what it looks like in that courtroom. This is Paul Flores' jurors and Ruben Flores' jury. So they are both seated on the left-hand side of this particular courtroom. Ruben Flores, the father, his jury and his alternates are seated in the gallery. And then in the jury box is Paul Flores. That's his jury and his alternates that remain.
Here we even get some insight to the more human side of the jurors, in Paul's jury in particular.
We were feeling worried and sick. Now, at this point in the court, Jennifer's voice was shaking. She held back tears, and actually 2 of Paul's jurors started to cry in addition.
Now that we got all that out of the way, let's head into the testimony for day 8. We will hear from 3 more witnesses today. One of them we've already heard from once. Mario Garcia was the first to testify, and he was an acquaintance of Kristin's and also of Paul's. He took the stand at 10:50 a.m., and he was a 26-year-old junior, actually, in May of 1996 when this all occurred. Of course, he went to Cal Poly, and he played pool sometimes with Paul in the dorms. Mario was questioned by all sides regarding Paul's black eye that he noticed. He talked about Paul having a baseball cap pulled down, trying to cover the black eye, and Mario asked him about the black eye, and Paul claimed someone pushed him at a party. Now I see why Paul's supposed confrontation earlier was brought in to court in previous testimony. How many lies regarding the black eye can Paul come up with? Now we're hearing he was pushed at a party. We also heard he got it playing basketball. We also heard he got it installing a stereo. They went on about the black eye. At times there was heated objections and overruling. For example, when Mario said Paul seemed edgy, Sanger asked if he'd ever been interrogated by police. The prosecution objected as argumentative, and the judge sustained that objection. The tone in the court remained heated. Many in the courtroom took notice of an oddity coming from both defense attorneys for Paul and Ruben. Tell me what you make of it. They were talking about Paul wearing a hat, and they were trying to get folks to confirm that he wore a hat a lot, but they chose the word notorious. They kept saying, Paul was notorious for wearing hats, wasn't he? Paul was notorious, and it's just a weird word to use. If you look up the definition and the connotation, it's just strange that they want to use that. Let me know what you think in the comments. Things continue to be heated with Sanger, and he was asking Garcia if he knew Paul was at another party where he had an altercation and he was thrown over a wall. Prosecution objected on relevance, which was sustained, and Sanger kept persisting with the judge. Sanger demanded to be heard, and they had a 5-minute sidebar. They returned to the courtroom, and that's where Sanger ended his cross-examination, and Mario was excused from his testimony at 11:19 a.m. As you can tell, this is all about credibility and how that works in a case this old. Are they lying, or was it just a long time ago? I like the way that this judge put it.
Would be, well, before you came to court, didn't the prosecutor show you your statements? And, well, sure. I mean, if I was going to testify about something that happened 26 years ago, I'd like to look back at some statement that was contemporaneous with the events as opposed to trying to remember something 26 years cold.
And honestly, you have to give the jury credit for, most
At one point, this jury was sternly admonished by the judge, reminding them to not discuss, read, etc. The usual jury instructions are given. I wonder who pushed the boundaries. Things like this are not good for the trial. Thank goodness there's lots of jury instructions to guide them through this. And here's a little more with that judge explaining about jury instruction.
Yeah, there's a specific instruction that's given in every criminal case about credibility of witnesses. And it talks about how well they can remember. Did they make a statement in the past that is consistent or inconsistent with their testimony? Importantly, in my mind, they're told what was the demeanor of the witness while testifying. So if you get a combative witness on the stand, it's probably going to adversely affect their credibility in most cases. And there's probably about 15 other things in that instruction, but they're given a pretty specific instruction about how to judge witness credibility. And eventually it's up to them.
Right, the jury.
Right.
Yeah. And I have noticed that many of the witnesses are quite nervous, but that's to be expected. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Next to testify was Felipe Arias, who was a freshman in 1996 at Cal Poly. He lived in the Trinity Hall dorm at the time. He knew Kristin. He met her at a fraternity party, and they were close friends. He talked about how she stayed with him 2 times in the months leading up to her disappearance, and she left a reggae CD and sandals and lip gloss there that remained long after she disappeared, which was kind of sad. I'm sure he felt so weird every time he looked at them. Side note. Singer challenged him on how many times Kristin actually stayed. He wanted to know, was it more like 5 or 6 times? And Felipe replied that he knows it was 2 times in his bed, and it was possibly additional times on the couch. He just couldn't remember. And Singer kept trying to pin him down to that, but he was not able to. We also heard conflicting stories, I'll say, versions, let's say, of Kristin not getting along with her roommate and her roommate saying they were fine. And this is actually what Felipe had to say about that.
Smart had told Philippe that she was having roommate trouble at the time and would sometimes need a place to stay when her roommate had a boy in the room.
We have some more jury questions. I'm starting to get used to these. It's pretty cool, actually. The first question was, when Kristin stayed with you, would she normally bring a backpack or another bag? Felipe answered he could not remember. The next question was, did you go to parties with Kristin? Felipe answered no. Another question was, did stairways at the end of the red brick dorm open to the inside or the outside on the first floor? Answer, inside. Felipe was excused at 11:57 a.m. After lunch, District Attorney Investigator J.T. Camp was back on the stand at 1:13 p.m. He was there to review Paul's DMV records from 1994 through 2022. They also went over Susan's driver's license from 93 and 97, where she used Ruben's address. And Singer hated that they were trying to introduce that into court, and he objected on relevance, cumulative, invasion of privacy, and for no apparent reason. I wish I could have seen his face when that was going on. It was overruled, though. And then Singer objected on 352, which is undue consumption of court time. And Judge O'Keefe again said no, that it was still overruled. And the same thing happened as the prosecution moved to publish Paul's sister Ermelinda's driver's license. That same thing, objection on grounds of 352. And Judge O'Keefe told the jury, it's stretch time and we'll be back in 5 minutes. So 5 minutes later, after they had a little sidebar, court resumed with the prosecution agreeing to redact Paul's driver's license number before publishing. Singer asked the record to reflect that he requested more to be redacted, and the judge says she would record it. The record will reflect that Paul's driver's license was published as follows. 1993, 96, 97, 98, and 2003 list Ruben's address as Arroyo Grande, Ruben's house. From 2005 to 2009, Paul's address is listed in Lawndale, California. From 2011 through 2020, Paul's address is listed in San Pedro, California. There's a brief cross-examination where he was asked about how you don't always look like your driver's license, and your address on your driver's license doesn't mean that you live there, and Camp agreed, saying that not necessarily on those items. And for example, my son uses our mailing address for multiple reasons and our address on his driver's license, but he doesn't live here. Camp was dismissed for the day at 2:34. Court got out early because the judge needs to use the courtroom to hear the motion for the media coalition to unseal all the documents in the case, including protective orders prohibiting anyone involved in the trial from speaking to the media, etc. about the case. And I'll do a separate episode later once I get the information as far as what's going to be released. I know so far there's been 300 pages released. They plan on releasing more. A lot of it will be case by case, where the attorney has to basically stipulate and give reasons why it should not be released. Comprising my research and putting it all together has been challenging, and it's also been sparse. Some things I don't want to miss sharing with you, so I'm going to add tidbits at the end when applicable, starting here. I know this is nothing new, but I really like this comprehensive map that this person put together here. Remember Kristin's friend Steve, the tall basketball player? I found a quote for him that I thought was worth repeating here. He was telling the court, "You know, I was known for basketball, and Paul was known for being a creep." I thought that was funny. And another ironic thing, Steve had originally said that he didn't trust police, and he actually eventually joined the military and became a cop himself. I just thought that was interesting enough to mention as well. Hopefully you guys like the tidbits. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll continue to do these. So, remember Ted? Scapegoat Ted? Well, I dug for some more information, and I found mention of Ted again. And I sure hope we hear from Ted himself. It seems at this point the prosecution would have to bring him into the courtroom since the defense keeps bringing him up.
Sanger, on cross, asked if her boyfriend Dustin was friends with a man called Ted. And did Ted come into the room that night? I'm sure he did. He came all the time. We were friends, she replied. Now at this stage, I think Sanger is introducing additional people that did or could have been in or around Kristin's room or dorm to lay out possibilities that other people, and not just Paul, could have had the opportunity to abduct Kristin that night.
I know the Smart family is in many of our hearts, and here's a little check-in on the Smart family and how they're doing. It must be so emotional for them after 26 years they finally get their day in court for their murdered, unrecovered 19-year-old daughter, only to have her character assassinated in the courtroom.
Hi, good evening to you, Julie. Another tough day of testimony, long-awaited testimony for the Smart family. They are here each and every day. Kristin Smart's siblings, Matt and Lindsay, and then, of course, father Stan and mother Denise. They are here. They were listening to character evidence coming in about their daughter and their sister. It was tough for them. I asked Denise as she was on her way out of court, "How you holding up?" She shook her head, she looked down, and she went like this. Clearly, it's been tough on this family.
Oh, absolutely, Matt. And you're paying close attention to everybody involved in this case.
Listen to the reaction the Smart family had here. I found it interesting.
During the disappearance, these were the observations that he had of his roommate, Paul Flores. He said that Paul would be verbally aggressive and confrontational with other people. So that's something that really resonated with these two juries, and also Kristin Smart's family, that really stopped what they were doing. They take notes every day, and they just really leaned in on that. And I think that that was tough testimony for them to listen to.
Kristin Smart's father, Stan Smart, and her brother, Matt, were both present in the courtroom today, with Matt occasionally putting his arm around his father. Kristin's mother, Denise, was also present, but in the overflow.
Court was not in session on Friday and will resume on Monday, August 8th. And I also noticed on the board behind Mario during his testimony that there will be no court Monday and Tuesday, August 22nd and 23rd. As always, justice for Kristin.
If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come.
Thanks for watching.
Bring my spirits up.
Don't forget to stop and smell the flowers.
There's some shit I